Hello to our guests and to those watching. I'm Anna Maria Della Costa, and I'm the education reporter for the Charlotte Observer. I want to welcome two board members from Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools, District 5 Representative Lisa Cline.
Hello.
And District 6 Representative Summer Nunn.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate it. It was a late night last night. It's been a hectic several months with the hiring of the superintendent and now the vote last night. We're going to talk today about the decision that was made with the South Charlotte Relief Boundary Plan. It's riled up parents. It's gotten a lot of talk, and I think this is a good chance for you guys to talk to the public and parents and kind of see the behind the scenes type stuff and the way you guys were thinking through this decision. It was a monumental decision affecting 42,000 families around that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start. I'm going to go ahead and ask the tough question first.
Oh boy. All right.
Because that's the way I roll.
Yeah.
7-2 last night to approve the plan, Superintendent Crystal Hill's plan for South Charlotte, which entails changing feeder patterns, changing student assignment, legacy enrollment. 2 no votes, and both of those were you. So I'll ask the tough question. Why did you vote no?
I'm going to start and then I'll
So with the superintendent's recommendation put forward to us, there were basically 3 ways we could vote. There was a vote yes, as it was motioned.
Mm-hmm.
There was vote yes with modifications, which I will acknowledge that 2 modifications were put forward, or amendments, and they did not pass. Myself and member Della, I put 2 forward. And then there was a no vote. And basically what that signaled is either it would pass as is, it would pass with modifications, or if it was a no, it would get sent back to staff. And my signal for no was I thought it should get sent back to staff. And that's not to say that I didn't think the map put South County in a better place. I just thought we could get it to a little bit of a better place than where we were in the recommendation, hence me offering modifications, hence us digging into the data further. So I will acknowledge the one challenge is with the high schools, like people needed to know that decision, but I just felt where we moved from draft 2 to the superintendent's recommendation and how there were some changes that some people didn't see coming. That's why I ended up voting no, because I don't think that they were given the same amount of opportunity. And I thought maybe we could tweak it a bit further.
Agreed, because in District 5, there were some areas that had not been in the earlier drafts. And that even goes back before draft 1 and 2. This was the color-coded drafts that the parent groups had worked with. There were certain areas that had not been addressed. And then with the superintendent's recommendation, they were thrown into a totally different pattern. And to their credit, they were blown off the rails with it. And they didn't have enough time to study it. We didn't have enough time to look at the data. And when Ms. Della had her proposed amendment, and I second both of them because I was in agreement that this would tighten it. it really pushed Carmel to the limit. And then when staff shared at the dais how much it was going to cost, that hurt, because $1 million is $1 million that we just don't have to spend. And so even though we were in agreement, this was a good amendment, when you started looking at the cost factor, that was tough. And especially when the future movements wouldn't start occurring to 2031. And that's 8 years of an overcrowded school. Granted, there are the other 3 middle schools that are coming online, hopefully, in the South County. We're overcrowded. You just said 42,000 out of 141,000. You're looking at a third, a little, I'm not a mathematician, I'm a social studies teacher, but you're looking at a large number of the school system in the South County. And we are packed. Our schools are, there's some that are not. And this plan, even though I voted against it, it just, we needed some tweaks that we could not afford the time, given that you have Power School with scheduling that ends, and we have the high school sports that start next week for summer practice and registration. We're on a timeline and a time crunch for staff and for principals and administrators to get next year started.
I believe Dennis Lucaria told me in the whole area, it's 42,000. Did the plan impact all 42,000? Not necessarily, but you're talking about that group. Really quick before I come back to a question, when you talked about the biggest complaint with her recommendation was some of these groups that were not in any draft, any iteration before this. But one thing that during your board comment prior to the vote, you said that you supported the superintendent's plan. Was that just kind of figurative?
It is figurative because, and thank you for bringing that up. It's figurative because even though we may disagree with something, we are a board and we have to support, as I told in my speech, you may not get what you want, but we've got to be positive. I'm going to support for the best direction for the district and to make anything that we start successful. So that's really important to know. I may have said no to the vote, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to support the plan.
I think a lot of people maybe don't understand that you saw the superintendent's proposal same time everyone else, or did you see it earlier? Did you know some of these communities that had not been mentioned in previous discussions were going to all of a sudden be in this proposal and there were going to be changes to their feeder?
Yeah, in general, we got the maps like a few days before it went to the public. So when you think about us, it's not like we are in the weeds working on the maps. And I think sometimes there's a misunderstanding with the public that we make the maps or are directing the maps. And it's quite the inverse. I mean, we have staff within CMS who that's their specialty, and that's what they are to be doing. And, I don't know if before we've ever done such a large area of the county, but this was it's like, are you doing a 50-piece puzzle or 3,000-piece puzzle? And this was like a 3,000-piece puzzle.
3,000.
And so it was very, very complex. So we only got it a few days. I think I received it Friday before it went public Monday.
Yeah.
So
I got it Thursday because the parent group either had it Friday or Saturday.
Yeah.
They keep it very much embargoed.
Yes.
To keep leaks.
Trust me, I know.
Y'all can't find out.
Yeah.
But so what was your response to the parents who you can feel for them?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, all of a sudden we're in this plan when we were not in this plan prior.
Yeah. Well, I think there was two responses for myself, and I'm not going to speak on behalf of the board. One, there were some positives that based on data, based on community impact had been made. At the same time, there were a more few drastic swings that I had concerns about that maybe we hadn't done engagement in that area, or that community felt that they were going a different route. And once the recommendation was made, it was the recommendation, and then it was given to us. And I think it's one of these things where staff are the experts on this, not the board. And so if really that feedback and those modifications need to be made, it should have probably been made at the staff level. And that was my challenge with the new groups. I mean, as expected, and you probably have this question, like we immediately started getting emails and phone calls and requests for meetings. And it was very important to listen to that feedback too. And if anything, one of the things, I think there's a lot of positive that came out of this process, and this is such a big process, but I think there's some lessons learned as well. And I think what's important is in business, we call it like a post-mortem, like what went well, what didn't. And I think if anything, the Board of Education, as well as the superintendent and staff, need to define this moving forward, because, with the bond hopefully passing in the fall, which we desperately need. And I know that was approved last night by the county commission, 7-2 as well. So I don't know if that's just luck that it was the same vote. But we desperately need more schools. So I just want to say, it's one of those things that, we did some things well, but I think there's some lessons learned. And as that new bond comes online, we need to have this process very defined so parents understand when a new school comes online in that area, what that process is going to be to understand where the new boundaries are going to get drawn.
And the high school is such a huge impact. We haven't had a high school to open in a while. And then
Palisades opened last year.
That's right. I forgot about sorry, Palisades.
But I did forget.
But when I think of that, Palisades is so far out, but sort of within the 485. We're right outside, but you're inner city. But Palisades opened up. They had issues trying to find the lines. But it does impact everything, because you've got a high school, we've got middle schools that are proposed, and the South County desperately needs middle schools.
Yes.
I mean, that was one of the things that we saw when they were showing us everything. We're like, Southwest Charlotte doesn't have a middle school, and we need to relieve. I mean, Community House is the largest middle school in the state. I think it's,
and then Southwest in the Steel Creek.
It's huge. I remember looking at them all. This is as big as some of the small like colleges.
Right.
And we've got other ones coming close, like Southwest in the Steel Creek area, which there is in the bond, a proposed new middle school. There's 3 new middle schools in the bond.
And there are 2 in the south, 1 in the north, because the north is growing. It's growing this way. And it is growing this way, but the county seems to be stretching north to south more than it is east to west right now. I use my hands a lot. Can you tell I'm a teacher?
Okay. I just was just thinking it's ironic because the parents don't want change, but they moved here because of, I don't know, job. They picked the schools. And that's what everybody else is doing. So it's kind of a catch-22 where you're moving here because of the area, so are other people, so there's going to be that growth.
I had that conversation with a husband and wife, moved here from New York City. They bought in a neighborhood specifically for the schools. They got changed. They were not happy, but the nice thing about this plan that has come about is the schools are now smaller. They will be smaller. It will allow for transfers. And I know there's been concerns with sports. They are working out those details. They could not work the details out till the vote happened. So they will have processes in place. So if a child wants to play a sport, they can play a sport, but they've got to get through to the different steps and making sure that we get the policy correct so that we're not violating policy. And that's why we have 2 years. But the nice thing about this whole program is that CMS was very futuristic. One of the things parents kept asking, legacy.
Mm-hmm.
Junior year is tough. You're applying to colleges. You need those teacher recommendations. Let us stay at our school. Also, for the ninth graders who are being moved, I don't want to go to ninth grade, get my group established, and then I'm moved. So CMS has done something totally radical, is allowing ninth graders and providing transportation for them if they want to go to their newly assigned school.
And
That's amazing.
That's amazing, and I know that's something that you guys wanted to hit on.
Yeah.
You talked about it's radical for CMS.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that a little bit more? And was this one of? I think you said this was one of the biggest things you heard when you were campaigning, and then because I mean this process started in early 2022.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So has that been something that's been talked about throughout this, and it kind of got lost a little bit?
Yeah. I can speak for myself, and my kids are still young, but speaking with lots of high school parents, it's one of the things that mattered most to them historically. And I think even in regulation, we've only opened schools with seniors,
9, 10,
allowing
11.
to
Yes.
stay at their current school, and then you open 9, 10, and 11. And I will say that's also what happened with Palisades recently in Still Creek. And some of the feedback has been they wish there would have been an option for juniors, especially if they've picked kind of their track at their
Mhm.
high school. And,
Yeah.
you're kind of, 9, 10 are kind of the beginning, 11, 12, especially if you're doing any certification or CTE, or in some cases IB at Myers Park is one of those things. You want to stay on that track. So it's very important that they have that option. And we heard that feedback overwhelmingly from everyone. It wasn't like, oh, we think that's a good idea. It was brought
Well,
forth by everybody, and everyone agreed
and-
with it.
And we use the Wake Forest
Yeah.
plan. Wake Forest Wake
Wake
County.
County,
Wake
yeah.
County has that plan. Well, we share. I know I shared it with staff, and we're not Wake. I'm like, no, we're better than Wake. You
Mhm.
can do this. And initially, they were like, oh my gosh, transportation is always on the forefront of news and parents because buses. It's hard to get drivers, but staff. Brian Schultz, Adam Johnson, Nicole Porte sat down and came up with a plan to support what the
Mhm.
parents wanted. And it's unheard of. And yes, we're not Wake. We're better than Wake. We're CMS. And they have done something one step further, which I think is great because in Wake, a lot of times they have to provide their own transportation. Here, we're providing the transportation. So that hits on the equity issue for those students who can't provide their own transportation.
And I know reporting through this whole thing, that was the one thing that all parents agreed on.
Yeah.
Is legacy.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's a huge step forward, and I think it showcases that we are making some change. We are listening to the community. We are trying to provide solutions together. And I think quite a few of us touched on that. So I think that's a huge thing. And high school is such an important time. And even at the middle school level, we're going to allow 8th graders too to finish that out. So I think it's a big step forward, and it shows
6th graders to start their
Yeah.
new school.
and it shows
for
we're
some of
being,
those.
a bit more progressive or moving forward and making further or providing further solutions, working with the community to figure out what's best for our kids.
how many parents, how many emails, how much feedback over, I mean, since you took office is it take office?
December.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the way you say it.
Yeah.
How much feedback have you gotten? Can you put that in numbers maybe?
Well, it started as a trickle, a
Yeah.
small trickle, and then it's become a tsunami, just a major waterfall. I would say one day I got like 150 emails, and they do copy everybody. And every email I've tried to answer, there for a while, I couldn't answer 150.
Yeah.
It does get overwhelming.
I'm
But
glad
it's-
you said that, because that's one of the things. The board's not responding, but you did.
Yeah, I stopped counting at 2,000, like
The total,
and
yeah.
the total. So I am gonna estimate since November, probably north of like 4,000
Yeah.
emails we've received. And I will say it's a mix of, and I think we probably got more
Mhm.
than others because we are the district reps for those areas. So in a lot of cases, all the board members get copied. And I encourage people to speak to all the board members. As you saw last night, all 9 of us vote. It's not like
We're just one
Lisa or
vote.
myself had any special power because it's in our district. But I mean, it's thousands. And like she said, it did start as a trickle, and it started, they would spike around community engagement. We would get a lot,
Ooh.
or as a new draft would come out. So we kind of prepared for those, like tsunamis. And as expected, we should. Like, new information
Yes.
came out. We need to absorb it. The community needed to absorb it. So I tried to answer as many emails as possible. I think the big thing for me was reading every email and understanding, because it's important to listen. These are their children. These are changes. I acknowledge that they're
You guys
hard.
know, your parents.
Yeah.
Yes, my children went through CMS.
Yeah.
I worked in CMS, so yes, I mean, it's important, and I've seen the changes. We talk about board changes. I sat with my kids one night when they went from Myers Park to Providence to South Mac back to Providence, all in 30 minutes. They did it on the
Oh my
dais,
gosh,
changing.
really?
And then we were back at Myers Park.
Yeah.
So it does happen.
I think we have a question from the audience.
Sure.
I think we might go ahead and take that.
We have 3 questions. The first is, when will CMS revisit the school boundaries again?
Should I repeat it? All right. The question from our we have questions from the audience. In case you didn't hear that little
Yeah.
side note. So one of the questions from an audience member is, when will CMS revisit the boundaries again? Are we talking about South Charlotte? When will CMS revisit this, and when?
Well, the middle schools are not open. It's when a new middle school opens. So right now there's the one that's off of Tom Short Road. Those lines have been drawn. Now, if you're looking at the whole picture, I think it's every 6 years that
Yeah.
they do it. So we are in these boundaries for the time being.
Yeah. They will come along as new schools open. We will have to address boundaries. As far as policy, it states that the board is to evaluate, I guess,
every
6 years, which that just passed. So it's one of these things that the board would have to look at policy or update policy in order to change that. So it will be more reactive based on as schools come online at this point, or the board would have to make some formal change in policy or decision to look at it sooner.
And that was one of the reasons we wanted the comprehensive review more in depth, so that we could look. I know Ms. Della had said something about the north side of the Myers Park district, because there are some schools that are smaller than the South County, and looking at redistricting. But right now, let us get through the next couple of years and let this settle, because again, this was 14 months of parents working, and very, very much let's just go ahead and do it. We've been in limbo.
I'm going to throw out my question, and we can go back to an audience. The transparency issue, you've heard this thrown out. CMS staff, board, the whole district, was the process transparent? Could it have been more transparent? Just your thoughts on that.
It's a balance, because there's a balance between transparency and a balance of telling everything going on. Just as the final draft, for example, we found out about Thursday or Friday, the parent group, and then they announced it. So it's boom, boom, boom. And staff and all of us would talk with different groups. Let's hear what your reasoning is. and they shared it with the parent groups who reached out, and anybody who reached out at these parent community engagement that we've had. I'm trying to think, we had a lot of
You
engagement.
had a lot.
I think I
So
mean
that was
I think
very
I've counted
transparent.
over
Yeah.
between community engagement and
And
parent
parent groups.
meetings and Zooms, I've been to over 50
Yeah.
of those alone. I equate it to, it's a lot like my child, right? Like we have parent teacher conferences. I want to understand what's happening at the classroom, but I'm not in the classroom teaching my child how to read and write. So to some extent, that's staff's responsibility. We hire these people, we pay these people to figure out these complex issues.
Mhm.
Now, as they do that, they need to go get feedback. And it's like, is this working? Because there are those 4 guiding principles. The main goal was to, decrease the overutilization or overcrowding at school.
Yeah.
So that was like the top goal. But then you've got policy that says, go try to accomplish these 4 things. And some of that is like, easy data to access, and some of it's complicated because even in the past 5 years, different HOAs have been formed, and
Mhm.
feeder patterns that made sense before don't make sense
Right.
now. So I think they did a good job of engaging the community, putting it all out there. I will say the challenge nowadays, and I say this as, a working parent, is there's so much going on with your kids. Sometimes you just miss. So I think
Mhm.
there's always be like, could we have pushed it out more, presented it more? And I think that's where we kind of need to
Yeah.
understand. I think the only challenge is the last draft, or not draft, but
The proposal.
recommendation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, to some extent, some of us were expecting it to be a tweak of the last draft, which is why,
It was
so to me, if anything, maybe there should have been a little bit of that same community engagement post that, in establishing what the finish line was going to be. So if anything, being a little clearer at like what the end was going to look like.
Yeah.
I think it is transparent. There is also, I will acknowledge, a parent work group, by the way. So
and
and-
they were very much aware. As I said, we knew, then the parent work group knew.
yeah,
And so they are the ones who were getting the information, are supposed to get the information to the community as well.
yeah,
And sometimes it didn't get to them. And acknowledging working parents or even single parents
Yeah.
who might not be able to participate.
yes,
That would be where I would say we need to go into the communities that we didn't necessarily see at these community engagements. Hey, there was this. So feedback to staff would be, let's make sure if we see a particular area that may be affected that we didn't see, we need to go into that community to make sure that they are aware.
yeah. And I just want to go back and acknowledge the parent work group, which is like there were parents from all the major
Mhm.
schools affected. And I know, they started over a year ago. And then as we came on, we asked them to kind of take a breath, and kind of regroup, which they did. And I think they expanded the parent work group at
They
that
did.
point too, as well. So I just want to acknowledge this parent work group who spent countless hours
They did.
actually working with staff. If you want to talk about, they actually
Dedication.
were working with staff on thinking through the solutions, because it's important that we have parents from those schools. Like, I'm not sitting in all those schools. I don't live in those neighborhoods. So I just want to say thank you to that parent work group. Their input, I know, was invaluable to staff. And honestly, it was invaluble to us as board
Right.
members.
Their
I spoke to a
dedication.
lot of them about like their thoughts, and because they knew the data. So I will say that is a great way, and I hope they continue that practice of involving parent
I think
work
their
group.
dedication is something, definitely thank you to them. And they stuck it out from the very beginning. Some of them had children who had left that school or had graduated, but they stuck with it because of their dedication. And so they knew what was going on. And I think that may have been probably the best thing that CMS had done is get that parent work
Yeah.
group involved and including the new schools as they came on board.
We have time for 2 more questions, one an audience and one to just end.
Yeah, we're gonna try to end by 45.
Oh, so we changed the time? Great.
We can keep going.
Yay. Go ahead.
Another question is, with the need for another middle school in South Charlotte, why is Della not being utilized as a middle school?
That is a huge question that I have heard a lot. Do I need to repeat that?
Oh,
I would repeat it.
Yeah.
With
Waddell.
why is Waddell not being utilized more as a high school?
Good question. We've asked that a lot.
Yeah, I will say there was a vote prior to us joining, Lisa and I, around making that the aviation program as well as the PACE Academy. And that vote was done, I think, maybe November.
Actually, it was done the night after the election
Election, yeah.
because we were all invited to the board meeting to start watching. So we were there. They did the vote. And I will be quite honest, I have been pushing, and people know that I wanted it reopened as a comprehensive high school with the magnet programs. Granted, it has, I think, 75 classrooms, which is the same size as Hopewell.
Can I ask really quick for those people who don't know, what is Waddell right now?
It is, I think, just housing the virtual.
It is housing the virtual, and next year it will reopen with PACE, which is the foreign language, for the multi-language learners to come in.
And it's refurbished.
Yes.
Yes.
It is upfitted, we'll say that.
Okay.
So, and it
Sorry
was,
to interrupt you.
no.
I'm trying. They're going through a lot of changes, but it was. I mean, it was open as a high school. It has amazing fields, or did. They keep it up.
Is that something that could be put on the table to open it back up as a comprehensive?
I'll refer back to some of my comments from last night. I think one of the things we have to do as we think about, do we look at the comprehensive plan? We've got some areas where schools are very overutilized and some that are not. And the question we have to answer is, how do we balance that?
Right.
We need to make sure all kids have the same equal access to a classroom. And I think we have to try to solve for making sure that if we have empty classrooms, we're figuring out ways that they get used. So for now, based on the vote, it will open with the PACE Academy program, which, by the way, was oversubscribed. So while we voted last night to pull out aviation,
PACE was oversubscribed.
So they're going to and I think that's going to be a tremendous program, because if you look at the growing number of multi-language learners here in this county, it's something that we need,
It'll help.
Not, I won't say get ahead, but play catch up on and start to figure out, more creative solutions to help, basically accelerate their learning curve too, and providing an environment that they can do that in. So it's just one of those things. And I mean, the Southwest Corridor has overcrowding too. I live in the Steel Creek area as well, and there's a new middle school. So it's one of these things, I think, I'm going to foreshadow and say the bond gets approved, which we desperately need the bond. I'm going to reiterate, since 2000, this county has doubled in population. We have not doubled the number of schools. We have not doubled the number of classrooms. We are behind. The state of North Carolina has not funded a school since the 90s. I was in school back then, by the way, in North Carolina. So I was in public K through 12 in the 90s. I'm just going to say that. So, it's very exciting, the fact that we have this potential bond and we have this ability to actually try to improve the classroom setting for the kids. But I think we do have a bit more work to figure out how do we balance this better across the county.
Right. And Waddell is when they opened Waddell, everybody was like, why did they build it there? Now, that was a long time ago, I remember. But now everything's grown around it. That whole area is growing. So there is a need, and the PACE will be great. And then the aviation, of course, we've delayed. And if it's subscribed better, we'll find the right place for it. And Dr. Hill's doing a great job of examining some of the magnet issues. And that's something that I've pushed. I know Summer has. We really are pushing at what are we doing with the magnet program.
We have a third question.
The third question is, we've received a reader question asking about your comments in support of the plan before voting no. Can you clarify one more time? You were speaking in favor and then voted no.
Well, and we talked about that. We talked
that.
about that earlier. I support our school system. I didn't vote for the plan or vote for it because it was not exactly what we needed. But I have to support, I'm a board member. I will support anything our school system puts in place, even though I may disagree with it. And I see myself as a role model to people who disagree with things. We have to, the vote was going to pass, but I'm going to support the system. So that is, I know it was confusing, but I really have to, I wanted to do that. And Summer and I both, our amendments did not pass. So I have to, because I support, I second
Yeah.
both of them. And so I had to vote no because they didn't pass.
What? Oh, go ahead.
Well, and I was just going to clarify again, a vote no isn't saying that you think this is bad. In
Right.
governance, it's a process. So it was to approve it as is or with amendments or send it back to staff.
Mhm.
And so I think sometimes people think of yes and no in absolutes when really it's a signal of where we are in the process at that time.
Right.
And so again, you know, if I like to think of it was good, I thought it could be better, you know? And
Yeah.
so, and that's just a difference that
And
other
it's
board
also-
members were fine with it
What
as
was
is.
it, like a 50-slide plan that hit how many schools? Like 27?
Yeah.
There's also a lot of parts of the plan that it would be a little odd if everybody agreed with every single little
Yeah.
intricate part of that plan.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
probably
Well-
shouldn't say that, but really.
Well, and that's why you can support something, but you can vote no. And there were things that I thought could be better.
Yeah.
And not to say that they didn't do a bad job. They didn't. That was with everything and all the moving parts, staff did a great job. But I voted no. And that's okay. I'm still going to get out there and support it and be, available to work with staff, with parents, whatever needs to be to build that bridge and get us straight ahead.
Talk about your amendments a little bit that you made last night and you seconded. Yours was a kind of long amendment.
Yeah, partially because it's a complicated
So
feeder pattern
Exactly.
split situation right now.
So without getting into the weeds, were you surprised that the rest of the board did not go, vote yes on those amendments?
Here's what I will say
It's probably a difficult
is,
question.
there was a lot of questions asked by board members
Mhm.
over the past few weeks to see if there were potential tweaks and modifications. The challenge with the breadth of the situation is anytime you make a move, there's a domino effect, which is what we saw, by the way, play out when we moved from 2 to the superintendent's recommendation. So really, there were a few scenarios, and the one that I suggested was one I thought, while not perfect, did balance things in a different way. And the amendment I put forth was in the End Haven area. And just so everyone kind of level sets with this, it is kind of, it encroaches on the northern side of Ballantyne, moving towards really like the South Park area. So they will be moving to the new high school, which is very exciting. But from the middle school section, that area has like a 3-way split right now where they go to 3 different middle schools, which isn't ideal, by the way. We want to send groups of students together. In the proposal, there was this kind of weird, I'm going to quote what parents said, a weird peninsula along the bottom that was sending the southern portion to Quail Hollow, which that portion was at JMR right now, which had been moved out of Community House. So if that shows you anything, they were at Community House and had been and they're at JMR. So now we were going to send them to Quail. And then the northern portion was split between currently going to Quail or currently going to South Charlotte, because there was a two-way split in the north. And all my amendment really was, it was a north-south divide, and I kind of turned that east-west for a few. The main reason being that where our middle schools are located, we have a heavy concentration in kind of the northeast Ballantyne area, kind of moving into the Providence area.
Yeah.
So you've got JMR, South Charlotte, and the new middle school all kind of in a very similar area.
And
And
Ray
then-
Farms.
And Ray Farms as well, which is, a magnet that is a neighborhood magnet that's moving to a full magnet. And then Quail was, to the west. And so the one feedback from that area is they liked moving to a two-way split. So there were bigger groups of students moving together, but they found that the driving distances were much further, and some of them were going to the fourth furthest. So I was trying to, balance a little more of the home to school distance and proximity. And it did have, and I acknowledge this, it did change SES a little. So it's one of those things, to some extent, I provided it a little bit as a compromise and try to balance the four tenets. And it barely missed passing 4 to 5. Am I surprised a little, to be honest? But we'll just leave it at that. Obviously, I couldn't get, some of the other board members didn't get
Just
there.
couldn't get on board.
Yeah.
I want to jump in here, and we only have a few minutes left, I believe, to just say, and I have to be unbiased, but I'm going to say, I think for those listening or watching, I think that shows how much board members did. Some of you, maybe all of you, did do a deep dive into this. This wasn't just a rubber stamp. Oh, here it is.
Mm-mm.
You guys really, just from what you just said, which I could not ever repeat because, it involves so many schools. You guys did really do your due diligence in looking at these plans, and I think it proves it.
Well, and we don't control it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We got a lot of accusations of, oh, you're the one doing it. We just,
Oh, we got a lot. I
I'm
heard
sure.
a lot of that.
yeah.
You're a magician, Lisa.
Well, as I keep telling people, if I was that powerful, I would have my 25-year-old body and be in the Bahamas, just relaxing, not here with you. Sorry, as much as I'm having fun, but no, we don't have that power. So we look at it, we want to know so we can support or vote no, or say, we've got to communicate, because we were communicating information and sharing back to staff family feedback. Every time I would hit board services or Dennis and Claire, here's more information.
Mhm.
And so we were constantly doing that, and we knew it. And that was the great thing about our board members. They dug deep into Lenora, Jennifer, Melissa, everybody dug deep. Dee, Stephanie, everybody, Elise, they had to know what they were studying, and they asked for data. One of the things you'll learn about all of us now, we're very data driven. Give us the data.
Yeah.
And so staff is responding and giving us data.
Yeah. And I think I'll acknowledge, I'm not so sure amendments like that have been brought forward in the past in these scenarios. So
And
While-
Jennifer's was detailed too.
Yes.
while they did not pass, not that, and I by no means and someone that just says like this is effort, but I will say it was kind of a first time that we were trying to make very thoughtful tweaks. And to some extent, that's also why at that point in time, I was the no vote, because I thought there were some tweaks that we could get there, but we were all, it's kind of like the time clock was running out, which, you know, you've got to also give parents enough time to enroll their kids and put them in sports and get them ready. So it was a little bit, I don't want to say a double-edged sword, but we just had to move forward with it too. And it's one of those things, I feel like I know where everybody goes to school in my district now very well. So
I'm gonna ask one more question to end.
yeah.
This was a big vote.
Yeah.
Next big thing that you guys are moving toward is the bond. Selling this to parents, because it now goes to the voters.
Yeah.
You have a few, probably not a few. You have some parents saying, "Well, we're not going to support the bond now because we are unhappy." And I know you did it earlier, but I'm gonna give you the last few minutes or 1 minute. Sell the bond to these parents that are not happy with this decision.
We can't change what you don't like now without your support. So without new schools, it's the status quo of this particular vote. But if we have more schools, things are going to change, and the bonds are setting up for the future. We have to have the new schools in the areas, and it's not just in District 5 and 6. It's all of the districts.
1, 2, 3,
every
4,
district
5, and 6.
has bond needs, and we're expanding, and we need to be able to have the facilities for our children. And again, it's about the kids, and we need that. So if you don't like what way the vote went, you got to vote for the bond so we can build the schools, so that there'll be some future realignments where you might like what's happening. Top of the vote is South Meck with being rebuilt. We've got to look at it. And your kids are going to South Meck, new facility. We need those middle schools.
Yeah, I understand that some people aren't going to like the change, but I think we can all acknowledge that if you've been in quite a few of our schools, and I will say my kid's school is on the bond, and the amount of time that staff and teachers deal with building issues, or my daughter's kindergarten classroom, if the AC breaks at this point, they can't fix it. Parts don't exist anymore. So we've got schools that, you know, are 60 years old. We have got schools that are overcrowded. So we really, really need more classrooms. Again, I'm just going to anchor on, we don't have enough classrooms in this county, so that we keep the student and teacher ratio low. And we also don't want to be worried about if they're cold or if they have the right materials. So this,
or running water.
Yes.
There's a school on the west side, well water.
yeah, it's not even on public sewage. So I hope that people can separate boundary decisions from the fact that we need to invest further, not only in your kid, but all the kids here in the county. And when you do that, that improves things for their entire generation. And the reason we make these decisions is because we're behind in building schools, which is why it's so desperately needed.
Thank you guys so much. This has been awesome.
You get us talking about our passion.
Thank you for sharing your time with us. I think that our audience, our listeners, our readers learned a lot today. Again, I'm Anna Maria, and I am the education reporter for the Charlotte Observer. If you want to read any more of our coverage on this decision, please go to charlotteobserver.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you.